Ethan Carter grew up in a small house on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, where tree-lined streets and the sound of wind rustling through old shingles were familiar echoes of his childhood. At 16, Ethan was a tall, lanky teenager with messy brown hair and sharp green eyes that reflected both intelligence and the weariness of someone carrying wounds not easily healed. He lived with his mother, Helen Carter, in a modest wooden house with faded walls and worn-out furniture, clear signs of a family struggling financially. But what set Ethan apart wasn't poverty, it was the legacy his father, James Carter, had left behind, a legacy not measured in wealth, but in willpower, self-respect, and the lessons of martial arts deeply ingrained in his soul. James Carter, Ethan's father, was a former Marine who had served in the United States Marine Corps before retiring to become a local martial arts instructor. With a tall, broad-shouldered frame, a chiseled face, and calloused hands, he embodied strength and discipline. When Ethan was young, James often took him to the dojo, a repurposed old warehouse with polished wooden floors and heavy punching bags swaying from the ceiling, to teach him martial arts. Fighting isn't just about throwing punches, Ethan, he would say, his deep voice both firm and warm. It's about protecting what you love and becoming a man of integrity. He taught Ethan the fundamentals of karate and judo, not just for self-defense, but to instill in him the understanding that true strength lay in patience and courage. The afternoons spent in the dojo were Ethan's happiest moments. He remembered how his father stood tall, guiding his stance with steady hands, and how rare smiles would cross his face when Ethan mastered a difficult lock. James wasn't just his father, he was his mentor, his friend, and his greatest inspiration. He also left behind a treasured family heirloom, an old leather-bound martial arts journal, filled with carefully written notes on techniques, philosophies, and personal messages. On the very first page, in bold, unwavering handwriting, James had written, "Never let anyone take away your self-respect." Ethan carried that journal in his backpack every day, a talisman and a reminder of the father he loved. But that happiness didn't last. When Ethan was 8, James was killed in a car accident on his way home from teaching a class. A drunk driver crashed into his car, taking the life of the man Ethan had believed was invincible. James's death left an unfillable void in the Carter family. His mother, Helen, a petite woman with blonde hair that had begun graying too soon from worry, was forced to take on 2 jobs, working as a cashier during the day and cleaning office buildings at night to support Ethan. The military benefits weren't enough, and the family fell into financial hardship. Their house started to deteriorate, bills piled up, and Ethan often saw his mother sitting silently at the kitchen table, eyes red from crying when she thought he was asleep. Their struggles weighed heavily on Ethan, especially as he entered Jefferson High School. There, he felt out of place among classmates who came from wealthier families, kids who wore designer jackets, sported brand new sneakers, and bragged about vacations to Hawaii or Colorado. Ethan, in his worn-out hoodie and scuffed-up shoes, became an easy target for ridicule. He couldn't afford to join expensive extracurricular activities, didn't have the latest smartphone, and usually brought a packed lunch in an old plastic container instead of buying food from the cafeteria. The contrast made him self-conscious, and he kept his head down in the hallways, trying to blend into the crowd, hoping to go unnoticed. But Ethan wasn't completely alone. He found solace in his father's old dojo, the place his mother had kept. Even though it was no longer in operation, after school, he would go there alone, standing on the dusty wooden floor, practicing the techniques his father had once taught him. He would open the leather-bound martial arts journal, reading his father's words, feeling as if James were still there, guiding him through each movement. "When you feel your weakest, that's when you must stand your tallest," his father had written. Ethan whispered those words like a mantra, holding onto them as he fought to stay strong through the hardest days of his life. His mother, exhausted from work, always tried to encourage him. "You're more like your father than you think," she told him one evening. Seeing Ethan sitting at the kitchen table with James's notebook, "He would be proud of you." Ethan, Not because you're good at martial arts, but because you never give up. Those words were a rare light in Ethan's life, but they couldn't erase the loneliness he carried with him to school every day. He wanted to make his mother proud, to live by his father's teachings, but the weight of his family's struggles and the isolation at school sometimes made him wonder if he was strong enough to endure. What Ethan didn't know was that his greatest challenges were still ahead. His father's martial arts journal was more than just a keepsake. It was a source of strength that would help him face the darkest days of his life. As he entered his senior year of high school, a new threat emerged: Oliver Grayson, a wealthy and arrogant student who saw Ethan's insecurities as an easy target for relentless bullying. But it was in that darkness that Ethan would find his light, the light his father had ignited years ago in the dojo. The light that would not only change his own life but also the lives of those around him. Senior year at Jefferson High began under gray, rainy skies, a sign of the storm that was about to hit Ethan's life. The school, with its long, noisy hallways and colorful bulletin boards, was not a welcoming place for him. It was an arena where his poverty made him a target for those seeking to assert their dominance. And at the top of that hierarchy stood Oliver Grayson, a tall, broad-shouldered senior with slicked-back blonde hair and a smug, ever-present smirk. Oliver wasn't just another bully, he was a ringleader. Someone who knew how to rally others to his cause, making Ethan's suffering a spectacle for the amusement of his followers. Oliver didn't act alone. He had a group of friends, wealthy, stylishly dressed students who followed him like an entourage. From the first days of school, when Ethan walked into class with his worn-out backpack and scuffed sneakers, Oliver had marked him as a target. One afternoon in the cafeteria, as Ethan sat alone eating the lunch his mother had packed, Oliver sauntered over, grabbed the container from his hands, and dumped the food onto the floor in front of dozens of students. "Look at this," he sneered, his voice carrying across the room. "The poor kid brings leftovers from home. What's the matter, Carter? Your family too broke to buy real food?" Laughter erupted from the crowd. Not everyone found it funny. But under Oliver's influence, silence wasn't an option. Ethan knelt down, his hands trembling as he picked up his spilled lunch. He said nothing. He didn't fight back. He simply lowered his head and walked away. Oliver's torment didn't stop at public humiliation. He turned it into a game, encouraging others to join in. In class, he whispered to his friends, snickering when Ethan got an answer wrong. On the basketball court, he deliberately passed the ball too hard, sending Ethan stumbling to the ground, then shouted mockingly, "Oops, thought you knew how to play, Carter." Others, even those who weren't naturally cruel, got swept up in the act. Some participated out of fear of being targeted next. Others laughed simply to blend in. The psychological weight of it all made Ethan feel like the whole world was against him. The few friends he had slowly drifted away, not wanting to be associated with someone marked as a loser. The isolation wrapped around him like a suffocating fog, and for the first time in his life, he wondered if his father's words, about strength, about resilience, still held any meaning. But Oliver wasn't satisfied with just isolating Ethan at school. He escalated his attacks by spreading false rumors, turning Ethan into a constant target of ridicule. One afternoon, while Ethan was studying in the school library, he overheard two students whispering. "Did you hear? Oliver said Ethan stole from a convenience store to buy new shoes." Ethan froze. This was a complete lie. But rumors spread like wildfire. The next day, a group of students eyed him with suspicion, and some even called him a thief as he walked down the hallway. Oliver stood in the corner, smirking as Ethan lowered his head and hurried past, as if savoring every second of the humiliation he had orchestrated. The bullying didn't stop at the school gates. Oliver took it online, where Ethan had no way to escape. He created a public group chat on Instagram, adding dozens of students, and posted sneaky photos of Ethan, sitting alone in the cafeteria, walking home in his worn-out hoodie, along with cruel captions. "Look at this guy. Bet he's never seen real money in his life." Or, "Ethan Carter, the official loser of Jefferson." The posts racked up hundreds of likes and comments. ranging from mean-spirited jokes to outright insults. Ethan didn't even have social media to defend himself. His mom couldn't afford to buy him a smartphone, but he still heard about it from the whispers in class. Every night, when he got home, he felt like there was nowhere safe, nowhere to hide from the shame Oliver had unleashed. Oliver's bullying was a full-scale attack, words, actions, and the invisible knives of the internet, leaving Ethan completely isolated. At first, he tried to ignore it, telling himself that if he didn't react, Oliver would eventually get bored and stop. But his silence only made Oliver bolder. One day in gym class, Oliver shoved Ethan to the ground on the concrete court, laughing as Ethan's knee scraped and bled. "Look at you, weak like a little girl." Ethan got up, his fists clenched, but he remembered his father's words. Never fight out of anger. Only fight to protect. So he turned away. But Oliver's mocking eyes and the laughter of the crowd cut deeper than any punch ever could. Ethan began to feel suffocated. He went to school with his shoulders weighed down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, and often hid in the bathroom just to escape the crowd. At home, he hid the truth from his mother, not wanting to add to her worries when she was already exhausted from work. But every time he opened his father's martial arts journal and read the strong, steady words, "Strength is not in your fists, but in your heart," he felt a small spark of hope. He knew he couldn't let Oliver take away the self-respect his father had taught him to protect. But he still didn't know how to stand up for himself. Oliver had turned Ethan's life into an inescapable nightmare, but he didn't realize that inside the skinny teenager, the fire James Carter had lit was still burning. The wounds from the bullying wouldn't weigh Ethan down forever. They would become the driving force that helped him reclaim himself. And in the end, he would face his enemy not just with his fists, but with the resilience his father had left behind. In the weeks after Oliver Grayson made Ethan Carter his target at Jefferson High, Ethan's life sank into a thick fog of loneliness. Each day felt like an endless loop, the mocking laughter echoing through the hallways, the false rumors spreading through whispers and social media, and the distant looks from those who had once been his friends. He walked through the school gates with slumped shoulders, his old backpack pressing against his back, the weight of his father's martial arts journal serving as a constant reminder of the self-worth he was slowly losing. At 16, he had never felt smaller, trapped in a world where no one dared to stand up for him. And sometimes, he wondered if he was even worth saving. Ethan's loneliness wasn't just a feeling, it was a harsh reality. Old friends, like Tommy, the boy who used to play basketball with him in the backyard, now avoided him, not wanting to be associated with the poor kid Oliver had targeted. At lunch, Ethan sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, his mother's homemade meal lying untouched in front of him. But he no longer felt hungry. He overheard whispers from the next table. Oliver said not to go near him, or you'll get caught up in his stealing mess. He clenched his fists under the table but didn't look up. He was afraid that if he met someone's gaze, all he would see was either contempt or pity. At home, he hid his pain from his mother, forcing a strained smile when she asked about school, not wanting to add to the burden she already carried from working herself to exhaustion to provide for him. Ethan felt powerless, as if every door had been slammed shut in his face. He had thought about telling a teacher or the principal about Oliver's bullying. But then he remembered what had happened to another student who had spoken up. His bike was destroyed, his books torn apart, and threats echoed in the school bathrooms. No one dared to stand against Oliver. Not only was he wealthy, but his father was a well-known businessman in Portland, powerful enough to make teachers turn a blind eye to his son's actions. Ethan told himself that staying silent was the only way to avoid more trouble. But every time Oliver shoved him in the hallway or posted another humiliating comment online, he felt the self-respect his father had taught him slowly being crushed beneath Oliver's feet. Ethan's inner battle played out every night as he sat in his small bedroom under the dim glow of his desk lamp. He opened his father's martial arts journal, flipping through its yellowed pages, reading the firm, unwavering words. Don't let anyone make you feel unworthy. Stand up, even if you have to stand alone. The words echoed in his mind, but they clashed with the fear and doubt that held him captive. He wondered, if I stand up, what will happen? Oliver won't stop, he'll make things worse. But if I stay silent, what will I have left? He gripped the journal tightly, feeling as if his father was there, urging him to act, but his feet remained heavy as stone. Unable to move, Subat Luke I Ko An Den Vodwang Ku Kua Cha, Noi Dui Nyat An Kon Kam Thay and Tone. Mo Buoi Chu Sao Geo Hok, Ki Mwa Portland Roy Lat Fat, Ethan Buok Vau Na Ko Ku Ki, San Go Fu Bui Vang Len Tiang Kiu Doi Buok Chan An Dung Jua Kan Fong, Hit Do Kong Ki Mang Mui Go Va Ki Yuk, Roy Bat Do Thuk Hin Nung Dong Tak Karate Ma Cha An Tung Day. Moi Ku Dam, Moi Buok Chan La Mo Cash De An Trut Bo Noi Do. Nung Chung Kung Lam Bung Len Kao Hoi. Min Man Mi the Ne De Lam Gi Noi Min Kong Dam Doi Mat Voi Oliver? An Na Zong San, Mo Hoi Tham Dam Ao. Va Nin Len Tran Na. Cam Jok Ko Don De Nong Len Nuk Nu Mo Tang Da. But Ethan wasn't entirely alone. Someone else stepped into his life, bringing light into the darkness, Master Kobayashi, an elderly Japanese man who had once been a friend of his father. A retired judo master, he lived just a few blocks from the dojo and occasionally stopped by to check on the place. One day, when he saw Ethan practicing alone, he paused, his kind eyes studying the boy through round glasses. You fight well, but your spirit is troubled, he said, his voice deep yet gentle. Ethan hesitated, then told him about Oliver, the shoves, the rumors, the relentless ridicule. Kobayashi listened silently, then placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Your father taught you martial arts to protect, not to hide. Sometimes, protecting yourself is the only way to reclaim your self-respect. Kobayashi's words, along with the ones in his father's journal, became Ethan's greatest source of encouragement. The old master began training him each afternoon, not just in technique but in spirit. Fear is normal, he told Ethan, but letting it control you is defeat. Ethan trained under him, feeling his body and mind grow stronger. But his inner battle was far from over. He stood before the mirror at the dojo, staring at himself, a skinny teenager with eyes full of doubt, and wondered, can I stand up? Do I have the courage to face Oliver and his friends? Each night, as he lay in bed listening to the rain tapping against the window, he wrestled with two choices: stay silent and endure, or stand up and defend what his father had taught him. He thought of his mother's smile when she said his father would be proud of him, of Kobayashi's trusting gaze as he demonstrated a joint lock. Gradually, the fire his father had ignited in him, the fire of willpower and self-respect, began to burn stronger than his fear. Ethan knew he couldn't keep running. Oliver might have taken his friends, his dignity, and his peace, but he would never take away who he truly was. The rain poured heavily on a late October afternoon in Portland, Oregon, as Ethan Carter stepped into his father's old dojo, the one place where he had found peace amid Oliver Grayson's relentless bullying. At 16, he had endured months of loneliness and internal battles, but the lessons in his father's martial arts journal and Master Kobayashi's guidance had ignited a fire within him. As usual, he arrived at the dojo after school for training, but the moment he pushed open the worn wooden door, he froze, his heart pounding. The polished wooden floor was littered with debris, torn punching bags spilling sand, overturned training racks, and his father's memorial plaques ripped from the walls, shattered across the ground like broken memories. Ethan stepped inside, his fists tightening as the realization sank in. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. On the back wall, scrawled in dripping red spray paint, were the words, "Loser poor boy, Oliver." Blood rushed to his head, rage burning in his chest. The dojo wasn't just a training space, it was his father's legacy. The place where he had reclaimed himself after enduring Oliver's torment. This was the final straw. A laugh echoed from the corner of the dojo. Oliver and his three friends emerged from the shadows, gripping baseball bats and a can of spray paint, their faces smug with satisfaction. Look at this dump, Carter. Oliver sneered as he stepped forward, arrogance dripping from his voice. I thought I'd give it a little makeover. But turns out, it was beyond saving. His friends cackled. One of them, Kyle, swung his bat, smashing the already torn punching bag, sending sand cascading onto the floor. Ethan remained still, his eyes locked onto Oliver's. But in his mind, his father's words rang clear. Never fight out of anger, fight only to protect. He took a deep breath, his voice low but steady. Get out, Oliver. This isn't your place. Oliver sneered, stepping closer. Who do you think you are to give me orders? A broke loser like you doesn't get to speak. He turned to his friends. Take care of him. Kyle and the other two moved in, raising their bats, but before they could act, another voice rang out from the entrance. Stop. It was Tommy, Ethan's old friend, along with Mia, a younger student whom Oliver had bullied for refusing to do his homework. They stepped inside, fear flickering in their eyes but resolve holding them steady. Leave him alone, Tommy said, his voice shaky but firm. He didn't do anything wrong. Oliver burst into laughter and turned to Ethan. Look at this. Your little army of nobodies has come to save you. But no one can save you. He lunged, shoving Ethan hard against the wall. But this time, Ethan didn't back down. He deflected Oliver's arm and executed a swift joint lock, one Master Kobayashi had drilled into him. Oliver hit the floor with a stunned grunt. His friends charged in, but Ethan was quicker. He sidestepped Kyle's swing, sending him tumbling into the equipment rack. He didn't attack, he defended, holding his stance just as his father had taught him. Eyes locked on Oliver. The fight escalated as Oliver's crew turned on Tommy and Mia. Kyle grabbed Tommy by the collar, while another thug yanked Mia's hair. Seeing this, Ethan's anger crystallized into resolve. He moved. A low kick sent Kyle stumbling back, freeing Tommy. He then spun, catching Mia before she could fall. Enough. Ethan's voice thundered through the dojo. Oliver scrambled to his feet, rage twisting his features. You think you're a hero? I'll make you regret this. He lunged, fist raised. Ethan sidestepped, locked Oliver's arm again, and drove him to the floor, pinning him down. Breath heavy, Ethan stared down at Oliver. I don't want to fight you. I just want you to stop, not just with me, but with everyone. Oliver struggled, but Ethan held firm, his voice steady. You can bully me, trash this place, but I won't let you hurt anyone else. He glanced at Tommy and Mia. Their eyes shone with gratitude. In that moment, Ethan understood. This wasn't just his fight. He wasn't just standing up for himself. He was standing up for all of them. Oliver's friends backed away, uncertainty flickering in their eyes as they saw him restrained. Ethan released Oliver, standing tall, his gaze unwavering. I forgive you, Oliver, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to be like you. But if you ever bully anyone again, I won't hold back. Oliver sat on the floor, panting, for the first time without arrogance, only confusion. He didn't say a word. Instead, he got up, gathered his friends, and left the dojo, leaving behind broken remnants and a heavy silence. Tommy placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his voice choked with emotion. I'm sorry for drifting away. You're really strong. Mia nodded. Thank you, Ethan. Ethan gave a small smile, for the first time in months. He didn't feel alone. He looked around at the wrecked dojo. But instead of pain, he felt purpose. He wouldn't just protect his father's legacy, he would use it to help others find their own strength. When Kobayashi arrived after hearing from a neighbor, he looked at Ethan with pride. You've overcome your fear, Ethan. Your father would be proud. Ethan nodded, gripping the martial arts journal in his backpack. He knew this wasn't the end, it was the beginning. A journey of growth, resilience, and a promise that no one else would suffer the way he had. After the showdown at the dojo under the October rain in Portland, Oregon, Ethan Carter stood among the shattered wooden floorboards and torn punching bags. But inside, he no longer carried the weight of loneliness or fear. At 16, he had faced the greatest challenge of his life, not just with his fists, but with the resilience and kindness his father, James Carter, had instilled in him through the pages of the martial arts journal. Oliver Grayson and his gang had left, abandoning the dojo in ruins, but they had also left behind a different Ethan. One who no longer bowed to bullies, but stood tall with the resolve to protect not just himself, but those around him. In the days that followed, news of the dojo incident spread quickly through Jefferson High School. Tommy and Mia, the two students who had bravely stood with Ethan, recounted the story with open admiration. Ethan didn't just stand up to Oliver, he protected us, Mia told a group of friends during lunch, her eyes shining. Tommy nodded. He's stronger than any of us realized. Slowly, the students who had once avoided Ethan due to Oliver's influence began to look at him differently, not with pity, but with respect. The hallways, once filled with whispered insults and mockery, became a place where he walked with his head held high and his shoulders squared, no longer hiding in the shadows. But Ethan didn't stop at his personal victory. He looked at the wrecked dojo, the place where his father had once taught him resilience and self-respect, and saw an opportunity. With the help of his mother, Helen, and Master Kobayashi, he began repairing it. They swept up the broken debris, patched up the punching bags, and repainted the wall Oliver had defaced. One evening, as he sat on the freshly cleaned wooden floor with his mother, Ethan said, "I want to open a free martial arts class here, Mom, for kids like me, kids who have no money, no one to protect them." Helen smiled, her eyes misty. "Your father would be so proud, Ethan, and so am I." Nearby, Kobayashi nodded. "You're turning pain into strength. That is the true spirit of martial arts." Ethan's free martial arts class began on a weekend morning, with rare sunlight streaming through the pine trees outside the dojo. He stood in the center of the wooden floor, wearing one of his father's old karate uniforms, and welcomed more than a dozen students, kids from struggling neighborhoods. Those who had been bullied, those who felt lost, just as he once had. He taught them the basics that James had once taught him: a proper stance, a strong punch, the right way to breathe to stay calm. "Martial arts isn't about fighting," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It's about finding confidence and protecting what matters." The students listened intently, their eyes shining as they absorbed the strength Ethan shared, not just through his techniques, but through his heart. The biggest change came one afternoon, a few weeks later, when an unexpected figure appeared at the dojo entrance. Ethan was guiding a younger student on maintaining balance when he looked up and saw Oliver Grayson standing there, hands in his pockets, gaze lowered. The entire class fell silent, tension thick in the air as memories of their past confrontation resurfaced. Ethan stepped forward, his expression not angry but curious. "What do you want, Oliver?" Oliver took a deep breath, his voice quiet but sincere. I'm sorry, Ethan, for everything I did, at school, online, and here. I was wrong." Ethan stood still, looking at Oliver, the once arrogant face now filled with regret. He remembered the moment he had forgiven Oliver during their confrontation, not because Oliver deserved it, but because Ethan refused to carry hatred in his heart. "Why are you saying this now?" he asked. Oliver hesitated. "After that day, I realized you were stronger than me, not because you beat me, but because you didn't need revenge. I want to change, but I don't know where to start." He paused before adding, "Can I join your class? I want to learn how to stop hurting people." The class murmured in surprise, but Ethan raised his hand for silence. He studied Oliver and saw sincerity in his eyes. Then, he nodded. "All right, but in here, no one bullies anyone. If you agree to that, you can stay." Oliver nodded, stepping inside with an awkward posture. Ethan handed him an old karate uniform. As Oliver began practicing basic moves alongside the other students, Ethan felt something unexpected, not triumph, but hope. Hope that even someone like Oliver could change. Over time, Ethan's martial arts class became a safe haven for struggling kids in Portland. He didn't just teach them how to fight, he taught them how to rise after falling, how to believe in themselves, and how to support one another. Oliver slowly became part of the group, transforming from a bully into a teammate, He often stayed late to help Ethan clean the dojo. One day, as they repainted a wall together, Oliver said, "I used to think being feared made me strong. But you showed me this. This is what real strength looks like." Ethan smiled. "My dad taught me that. You just needed time to understand." The peak of this journey came on the day of his father's memorial, held at the dojo on the first anniversary of James Carter's passing. Ethan stood before the gathered crowd, his mother, Kobayashi, his students, and even Oliver, holding his father's martial arts journal in his hands. He took a deep breath, his voice steady in the quiet space. "My father used to say that strength isn't in your fists, it's in your heart. It took me a long time to understand that. I was bullied, I felt alone, but I never gave up, because of my father, my mother, and everyone who believed in me." He glanced at Oliver, then at his students. "I didn't start this class just to teach martial arts. I started it so you would know that you're not alone. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's standing up despite being afraid. And love has the power to change even those you thought would never change." His mother, Helen, stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Your father would be so proud of you." "Ethan," Kobayashi nodded, his eyes filled with admiration. "You are a true martial artist." Oliver stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Ethan smiled, feeling a lightness in his heart he hadn't felt in a long time. He placed the journal on the small shrine dedicated to his father and whispered, "I did it, Dad, I hope you see." As the ceremony ended, Ethan stood outside the dojo, watching his students leave with smiles on their faces. He knew his journey wasn't over, there were still kids who needed help, wounds that needed healing, but he had found his purpose, turning his father's legacy into a light for others. His story wasn't just about overcoming bullies, it was about perseverance, forgiveness, and the power of kindness to change even the hardest hearts. Now, we want to hear from you, those who have walked alongside Ethan on this journey. What do you think of his story? Have you ever faced bullying or witnessed someone rise above it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story could inspire others. Ethan has shown us that anyone can stand up, and together, we can create change. If this story resonated with you, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss more stories of courage and hope. Let's build a world where no one has to feel alone, just like Ethan did in his little dojo.